Compared to some of my other videos, this one's quite interesting, but in Spain at least it's still a very sensitive topic, and I'm not an expert, so if I've misunderstood anything or if I've given the wrong emphasis to some things and forgotten other things altogether, I apologise in advance. But I wanted to make the video, so here it is. If you walk the Camino Francés, then the day before you get to Burgos, at a place called La Pedraja, there's a memorial to people who were killed during the Spanish Civil War, and on it there's an inscription that reads, "In this place 300 people were shot by those who supported the coup d'etat of General Francisco Franco against the legitimately established Second Republic, and which led to the Spanish Civil War between 1936 and 1939. They were killed in the first months of the Civil War for their political ideals and for defending freedom. This humble monument, made by their families, will serve to never forget them. Rest in peace." There could be as many as 4,000 mass graves spread across Spain. There are at least 2,500. And altogether, it's thought there are about 110,000 people buried in them. It's the highest number of missing people of any country in the world except for Cambodia. In some ways, the inscription written on the memorial is a good summary of what went on during the Spanish Civil War, so we need to know a bit more about that. In 1936, Spain had a democratically elected government. It was left-wing. The army didn't like this, so they staged a coup. The army were supported by the church, right-wing political parties, including the Phalangists, and by wealthy landowners and the aristocracy, and I'm going to call them in this video the nationalists. The people who tried to oppose the coup and who supported the legitimate government are known as the Republicans. And in Malaga, Madrid and Barcelona, the Republicans were able to successfully resist the coup, and so you end up with a map like this, showing some areas of Spain are controlled by the Republicans, some are controlled by the nationalists. You might think that a lot of the fighting and the killings happened along the boundaries between the two. But if you think in each part of Spain, there were some people who supported the nationalists, some people who supported the Republicans. There was a lot of killing that happened right across the country. So, for example, it's thought that maybe as many as 500,000 people were killed during the Spanish Civil War itself. Although it's difficult to come up with an accurate figure because of reasons we'll go into in a minute. Anyway, of those 500,000 who could have been killed, maybe as many as 200,000 were executed. And just like the people at La Pedraja, right at the very beginning, which makes me think it wasn't that the war had been dragging on for years and things have got worse and worse, but right from the very beginning there was lots of bad feeling between the Republicans and the nationalists. So to understand that, we need to know a bit more about the people. One of the best known books on modern Spanish history is The Ghosts of Spain by Charles Tremlett. And in one of the chapters he describes what happened to 3 women who lived in a village that was controlled by the nationalists. He said one night they were put onto a lorry, they were driven a short distance out of the village, they were killed and their bodies left at the side of the road. The next day a farm worker found the bodies and he buried them right there, right by the road. Do you know why they were killed? One of the women was known to read a left-wing newspaper, which meant she was one of the few people in the village who could read, but she was a left-winger. One woman had an affair with a man who lived in the village before he was married, but his wife was still jealous, so she asked if she could be killed. And a third woman, she had left-wing views and she was known to be a Protestant as well, so they got rid of her. And we know about this story because when Giles was writing the book, their descendants had recently excavated the grave and had the bodies or the bones reinterred in the village graveyard. They didn't need any police involvement, the coroner didn't need to be notified, they didn't need to get death certificates because everyone in the village knew what had happened. They knew who the women were, where they were buried, how they were killed, who killed them. When Giles went to interview the mayoress of the village to talk about this, it turned out she was the niece of the man who'd organised the killings in the first place. And when he spoke to her, she said, well, it wasn't just the nationalists who did the killing. Before the village was controlled by the nationalists, the Republicans were in charge, and she said, oh, they killed lots of people as well. And it wasn't just rhetoric. She knew the names of individuals and the reasons they'd been killed. One man, he wasn't a fascist, he was just a conservative, but they were killed. The book was published in 2006, and at that time Giles was still able to go, for example, to an old people's home, and the people who'd carried out the killings were still alive. People knew who they were, their preferred method of killing, how many people they'd killed. Can you imagine what it must be like living in a place where one group of people have killed another group of people's ancestors, and you know who they are and how they did it? What it must be like to live together like that. To understand that, we need to know about what's called the silence. The war ended in 1939 and 500,000 Republicans went into exile. They had to do that because the killings didn't stop when the war ended. And in fact, the last execution of a Republican was in 1963, and the last political prisoners to be released, that was in 1977, when democracy was introduced. So the only way nationalists and Republicans could live together in the same villages was just by not mentioning the war at all, and this silence pervaded. So when Giles was researching his book and he visited killers in old people's homes, they would have been nationalist killers because the Republican ones would have been killed or would have had to go into exile. The mass grave at La Pedraja was excavated in 2010, and still there were enough people alive so they knew who was buried in the grave and what clothes they were wearing, and they used that to be able to identify the bones. But even still, the authorities believe a lot more people knew what had happened but didn't want to come forward or give information because this silence still carries on. And they believe the grave would have been dug under force, and people threatened, if you ever mention who's in the grave or that the grave exists, you'll be in the grave as well. So for 40 years there was just this silence. In 1975 the dictatorship went into sudden decline, and by 1977 Spain was a democracy and a general amnesty was declared. Even people who you might think would want justice to be brought against the people who had carried out the killings supported the amnesty because they wanted to put the war behind them and look forward to the future. And in fact, during the 40 years of the dictatorship, a lot of the historical evidence was lost. In Barcelona, the entire archive of the national movement was destroyed. In Madrid, they were a bit more selective, but still they got rid of incriminating evidence. Even now, apparently Spanish history books are very wary about coming up, for example, with an estimate of how many people were killed during the war. At the mass grave at La Pedraja, every year, every November, since 1976, the Families Association has met there to remember the relatives who they believe are buried there, so there's a bit of progress. After years of silence and trying to forget, things are starting to change in Spain. For example, until recently, even democratic governments have kept the archives sealed and won't let historians look at them. But in July 2018, the government announced a truth commission to look at things such as how many people died during the war, were any crimes against humanity committed. They may even ban organisations that think that having a fascist dictatorship is a good idea. At La Pedraja, that was excavated in 2010, and that was with money from the government. And in fact, the government is currently thinking about opening another 1,000 mass graves. So things are changing. If you're walking the Camino, then apparently most village squares and churches all have a memorial to those who died during the war, or at least the nationalists who died during the war. Although I walked the Camino and didn't notice them at all, so keep a lookout for those. So that's my video about the mass grave at La Pedraja and the Spanish Civil War.